Hello, my beloved students. The subject which we are going to discuss is disability and human rights, national and international perspective. So, shall we get started? All right. When people talk about human rights, they often ignore the person with disabilities, and it is only in the recent past that people began to understand the obligation for protection of the rights of persons with disabilities, as, after all, violation of the rights of the persons with disabilities are also violation of human rights. Disabilities, whether of physical or mental, may arise from birth or due to some act or omission that may take place in the human life which renders someone a disabled or handicapped person. The legendary perspective. The depiction of human life in the epic and Mahakavya has numerous examples of disabled persons whose existence is a sheer disgust, and they are made to exist being anguished due to inferiority complex, which is caused by the people who look them down and made to exist a wretched and pathetic life. A reference to the story of Lord Krishna is glaring. Kubja is a woman, ugly and hunchback, who lived in Mathura during the regime of King Kamsa, the wicked. She served the king with her heart and soul as a poor servant. She has been the laughingstock of anyone and everyone, and been the target of stones hurled by naughty guys, and also give unbearable remarks of her ugly appearance, a hunchback in tatters with shabby look. There was none to feel pity for her, being a woman disabled with cerebral palsy and locomotor disability from her birth. She served the king and led a lone, spinsterish life with the trust and hope that when someone is alone and forlorn, the Almighty is there to protect. At this juncture, Lord Krishna and his elder brother Baldev arrived at Mathura palace on the invitation of the King Kamsa, where Kubja had confronted with Lord Krishna, who passed a remark to her, "Oh, the Queen of Beauty." The remark has touched the heart of Kubja. She felt humiliated extremely and reacted seriously, as it is a remark not from a layman but from a person who is said to be the Lord. The Lord again addressed her in a smiling face. Beauty is not only to the exoteric appearance, but it refers to the esoteric qualities of which Kubja is undoubtedly pure in her heart, and as such she is an example of beauty in true sense. The epic Mahabharata has innumerable examples of the existence of persons with disabilities, either from the birth or made to be disabled by the act of persons. The king of Hastinapur in Mahabharata is Dhritarashtra, who is a visually impaired person from his birth. His queen wife Gandhari, who is not a visually impaired person, but nevertheless has opted for existence as a blind woman by tying one eye veil on her both the eyes. They ruled the realm of Bharat as king and queen, even though a blind couple. Let us also discuss the historical perspective. In the olden days, a disability either of physical or mental was considered to be a result of commission of a sinful act, and in return a person suffers because of the inherited taints. It was believed that it is at the best by the grace of Almighty that one may get rid of being a disabled person. During the days of the autocratic regime of monarchy, various punishments were awarded, like amputation of limbs, based on the retributive theory of punishment, where a wrongdoer is made to suffer in proportion with the victim, in the scale of an eye for eye, a tooth for tooth. Thus, many persons were made to be disabled physically by the act and the authority of the state, which are unquestionable. There existed very thin rules of restraint upon means and method of combat, but the right of the belligerents to adopt means of injuring the enemy is not unlimited. To mention the Geneva Convention of 1949, even though not a very ancient code, but is still relevant to the issue of disability. Under Article 3 of the Convention, in case of an armed conflict not of an international character, occurring in the territory of one of the high contracting parties, each party to the conflict shall be bound to apply as a minimum some provisions of which mention may be made. So now, let us refer to the person with disabilities and the United Nations. The United Nations was founded on the principle of equality for all. The United Nations Charter, which was signed in San Francisco on the 26th June 1945 and came to be in force from the 24th October 1945, affirms the essentiality of universal respect for and observance of human rights and fundamental freedom for all without distinction. The international community has gradually started understanding the necessity to recognize and protect the right of the disabled people by suitable human rights instruments. The United Nations Secretariat, the Economic and Social Council, and its subsidiary organ, that is the Social Commission, is the principal body which is dealing with disability issues. At the beginning, the United Nations concentrated on disability prevention and rehabilitation, but around the year 1970, the focus is shifted to the concept of human rights for disabled persons, and the growing international concern for human rights started covering the human rights of persons with disabilities. The concern was apparent when the General Assembly took up the Declaration on the Rights of the Mentally Retarded Persons and the Declaration of the Right of the Disabled Persons. The Assembly proclaimed the year 1981 to be the International Year for Disabled Persons. It is also pertinent to point out here that the rights of the individuals with disabilities are embedded in the Charter of United Nations, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and International Covenant on Human Rights. The 3rd December 1981 was celebrated with numerous programs, research projects, policy innovations, and recommendations in the year 1982. The General Assembly took a major step towards follow-up action by taking up the World Programme of Action concerning disabled persons. The program restructured disability policy into prevention, rehabilitation, and equalization of opportunities. As far as the national perspective on the issue of disabilities is concerned, the issue of human rights of the people with disabilities has been ignored for decades, and a mention may be made of the Mental Health Act 1987 being a law made by the Indian Parliament which covers disability issue regarding the mental aspects. But for the first time, the Parliament of India passed the comprehensive legislation for the persons with disabilities entitled "The Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities, Protection of the Rights and the Full Participation Act 1995. The Act has legally endorsed the rights of access of the disabled people to education, vocational training, employment opportunities, travel and public transport and mobility schemes, barrier-free environment and integrated living, information and communication strategies, independence and dignity. The Act was passed in December 1995. It became enforceable on the 7th February 1996. The Act accommodates the disabled people at par with other citizens of India with respect to education, vocational training, and employment. In order to give effect to the provisions of the Act, the central government has made the rule known as the Persons with Disabilities, Equal Opportunities, Protection of the Rights and the Full Participation Rules 1996. There have been a number of programs, schemes and services for the disabled people in India, but there was no separate law to protect the rights of the disabled people. The Act has given a clear meaning of disability, and further, the Act has also given statutory recognition to the policy of 3% reservation in all the group C and D posts, and has extended the reservation to group A and B posts also. The Act further declares that the state shall progressively ensure that every child with disability has access to free education until the age of 18 years. Well, friends, as we know, prevention is better than cure. So apart from making provisions under the Indian Disability Act for education, employment, non-discrimination, etc., the aspect of prevention and research is also not the less important. Chapter 4 of the Disability Act laid down the provision of early detection of disabilities, and Chapter 9 made provisions for research and manpower development. Under Chapter 4 of the Act, the appropriate governments and local authorities are to take certain steps for prevention of occurring of disabilities. It is provided that with a view to prevention, the occurrence of disabilities, the appropriate governments and the local authorities shall undertake or cause to undertake surveys, investigations and research concerning the cause of occurrence of disabilities, promote various methods of preventing disabilities, screen all the children at least once in a year for the purpose of identifying at-risk cases, provide facilities for training to the staff at the primary health centers, sponsor or cause to be sponsored awareness campaigns and disseminate or cause to be disseminated information for general hygiene, health and sanitation. Take measures for prenatal, perinatal and postnatal care of mother and child. Educate the public through the preschools, primary health centers, village level workers and Anganwadi workers. Create awareness amongst the masses through television, radio and other mass media or the cases of disabilities and the preventive measures to be adopted. As far as research and manpower development in relation to disability issue is concerned, Chapter 9 provides that the appropriate government and the local authorities shall promote and sponsor research inter alia in the following areas to mention: prevention of disabilities, rehabilitation including community-based rehabilitation, development of assistive devices including their psychosocial aspects, job identification, on-site modifications in offices and factories. One thing we must discuss: there is no guideline for compliance with the provisions of this Act, and we must focus on that point also. In India, the authorities concerned and the appropriate government, including local bodies, are yet to take measures to ensure the implementation of the provisions of accessibility for disabled persons. In spite of all the willingness, the provisions of the law made the authorities to establish an excuse. For instance, under Section 25 of the Act regarding prevention and detection of disabilities, the provision starts as within the limits of their economic capacity and development, the appropriate authority or the local authority may take up preventive measures for preventing occurrence of disabilities. Section 44 of the Act also states that establishments in the transport sector shall be within the limits of their economic capacity and development for the benefit of the persons with disabilities. Take special measures such as adopt rail compartments, buses, vessels and aircraft in such a way as to permit easy access to such persons. Adopt toilets in the rail compartments, vessels, aircrafts and waiting rooms in such a way as to permit wheelchair users to use them conveniently. Friends, let me conclude by mentioning few words. While on one hand, the issue of the human rights of the people with disabilities has been ignored for decades by the international agencies vested with the protection of human rights, and also ignored by the municipal legislations. On the other, the world of the disabled is changing. The aspirations of the people are also changing. Moreover, the advancement of science and technology, particularly in the medical science, is also an area where treatments given to disabled people are seen to be a reality to transform into a normal person. It is to be noted that the disabled are not people with non-abilities. They are people with different abilities. They are not to be treated as special category called the handicapped. The concept of human right would create a barrier-free environment for persons with disabilities. Further, provisions would be required to be made to incorporate guidelines and actions that should be taken up by the authorities under the Act in order to implement the Act in letter and spirit. Let the Indian disability law come up at par with the provisions of the international law on the disability. Have a good day. Thank you very much.